WorldNet Daily. We are live. It is Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024, the day after the media spin. The media was on severe spin cycle last night, trying to tell us that Governor Tim Walz somehow was perfectly fine during the debate last night against Senator JD Vance, VP candidate under Trump for the Republican ticket. Welcome everybody to the program. We have Josh Turnbow and Brian Allman in their virtual studio today.
The Bald Brothers. Man.
Yeah, there they are. Good to see you guys.
What's up, everybody?
Good to see you guys. Now, we were here last night. I don't know if anybody was here last night watching us. Me and Josh and Elizabeth Farah were here breaking down in real time the debate, but we got some more reactions from across the news sphere and the Twitter sphere and all that stuff. So please head over to X, cycle through our X feed, and let's bring up this first story here over at WorldNet Daily. Walz turns up at the debate with JD Vance to deliver a word salad in answer to a question, and that question, of course, was, where were you during the Tiananmen Square? I mean, there was a lot of questions, but the Tiananmen Square one was particularly awful, and he just kind of floundered there. That was really bad, gentlemen. Is that our first clip? Or no, we wanted to do is I wanted to show Jeffrey Tucker, Mr. Bowtie himself, the only one left in a bow tie out there. Here was Jeffrey Tucker. This is what he tweeted. He said, last night's debate was a condescending disgrace, lorded over by childish moderators touting middlebrow socialist prattle and bad science, and saved only by Vance's surprising, I don't even know that word, wow. Help me out here, guys. What is that word?
Erudition.
Erudition. Thank you. The smartest man in the room, Brian Allman.
Yeah.
And mature demeanor. He was certainly the odd man out in that stew of stupid. And I mean, this is a great tweet. I tweeted it out. I reposted it. It was fantastic. He really nails it there. And to kind of just show you and give it a little bit of taste of where we're at with this, let's go to this first clip. He didn't even, I mean, and we'll cover Iran today and Israel and the stuff that's going on there. But he was asked about this. This was the first question right off the bat. Let's see how he did.
Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But
I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul. I award you no.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to hear that one a lot. But guys, Brian, what do you think? How did Tim Walz do last night? And that's just the tip of the iceberg right there.
Honestly, I don't think he did incredibly bad. He wasn't. It wasn't awful. It wasn't like Joe Biden a couple months ago. He was, mostly inoffensive. He stumbled over his words sometimes. He obviously had trouble answering some questions, like the stuff about visiting China, during the Tiananmen Square events. He was what he was. I was reading a tweet. I think it was from Andrew Isker, who I know you've had on before. He moved out of Minnesota because of Tim Walz's policies, and he was saying that Republicans in Minnesota have just been too nice to really challenge Tim Walz over the years in his time in Congress and his time as governor. And now here he is finally on the national stage with somebody who is not necessarily going to be too nice. And I think it's not so much a case that Walz was awful. He wasn't great, but he wasn't awful. But JD Vance was so much better. And the contrast, I think, is what people are going to remember. The contrast between the bumbling, foolish Walz and the sharp and intelligent and yet compassionate JD Vance.
Yeah, I think that's a great point you make there, Brian. And Josh, Rachel Maddow kind of said something somewhat similar. I don't want to compare what Brian just said to what Rachel Maddow just said, but she kind of alluded to that. Let's watch this clip real quick, Josh.
I think the big picture takeaway from this is that one of these candidates is much slicker than the other, is a much more practiced kind of professional debate style speaker, and the other candidate won. There was one bad moment for Tim Walz in this debate where he got mixed up and embarrassed in answering a question about exactly what month he had been in China in relation to the Tiananmen Square protest. But then on guns, on January 6th, on Obamacare, on the economy, on blaming everything on the border, back again on healthcare, on abortion, on every issue on substance. JD Vance was very polished and very slick, and Tim Walz beat him on all the substantive points.
It's called.
She
it's
has a
called
hard
the
time.
truth.
She's such a dishonest
she had a hard
act.
time trying to get that out, right, guys? She had a
Yeah.
hard time getting that out. Come on.
It's this idea that if she's not being objective, obviously. And I think conservatives are more likely to be objective in that if one of our candidates is up on stage and doesn't have a great night, we'll say, okay, yeah, they didn't have a great night, but here's some things that happened. They can't, because Walz is saying the things they agree with and what Maddow agrees with, she has to say that he's the winner because it's required. It's
the
pretty,
end of democracy as well. If he wins, right? So.
And the funny thing is that she's talking about how JD Vance was more polished because he's a better speaker. Vance has been in politics for 2 years, whereas Walz has been in politics for what, 30? It's
right.
Who should be better at this?
And like you make the point, being on the national stage now, like being on the national stage means that people go back in time and listen and to every word that you've ever said,
right?
And there's these inconsistencies that start coming up, and you realize when he's up there talking about how like, oh well, I've been in Congress, I've been a governor, I've been this, I've been that. And people like me, and it's like, well, now we're just discovering that you're full of lies, that you like to fib, you like to embellish on your record and all of the things that you've done, and now you're being caught, right, Josh?
Absolutely. And I was going to say, Matt, we have this tweet from our friend Nick Solheim queued up. This is a meme now. POV, the moderator asks you about why you lied about being in China during Tiananmen Square massacre.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I mean, that's
he was frozen for a minute, and then but obviously Rachel Maddow, they're already doing cover for the guy, which they just won't say like this is an egregious lie. This is maybe even more blatant than the wiggling around the stolen valor. This takes me back to like, was it Brokaw or who was it? Was it also Hillary Clinton that they were landing under sniper fire?
Right.
The Brokaw successor, Brian.
Jennings. Was it Jennings?
No.
Was it Brian Williams?
Brian Williams.
It was
yes.
Brian Williams.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just media buffoons lying.
Yeah, and it was and since this was the latest discovered lie about Tiananmen Square, they decided to just focus on that one and not all the other ones that he's said, about being about being under battle, before he left the guard and all
carrying
that.
arms in combat.
Yeah. So
he carried his arms in combat.
Well, speaking of the moderators here, as we know from the last two debates, the moderators will fact check one side more than the other, sometimes the other side never. And so going into this debate, one of the rules that the both campaigns agreed upon was that the moderators would not be doing any fact checking. And but they just can't seem to help themselves. They just can't. It's like a kid sitting alone in front of the cookies and it's just like, I just had to take one. Let's watch what happened to that.
Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank you.
Margaret, the rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on.
Yeah, it is. I wish everybody's sharing just that clip. I wish we had the whole thing. I wanted to hear what the fact check was, that got her in trouble there, because JD Vance is spot on there to call that out and to really focus on the fact that like you guys, we've set the rules and you're the ones breaking them. Don't you think that was an important moment, Brian?
Yeah, and as part of the larger meta narrative here, the left-wing media has been portraying Tim Walz as a new symbol of masculinity, and that he's kind of this goofy white guy who's self-deprecating. It's almost a minstrel show of white people, and he's they're saying he's a new vision of masculinity, not toxic masculinity, whatever that means. And I think the most important part of that is that he's the underling to Kamala Harris on the ticket. So he, the best version of a man you can be is to submit to women. It's trying to, I guess, invert the traditional view of things, and I don't think the fact that they put 2 female moderators in there was a coincidence. I think they wanted to kind of demonstrate that, and they got their sound clip. If you're on the right, you're looking at that and saying, oh, those awful moderators, they muted his mic because he dared challenge their assertion. But if you're on the left, you're looking at that and saying, oh, that toxic man is mansplaining to those brave women. And so both sides are going to read into that what they wanted to. And I think it was a deliberate setup.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Brian. And
good point.
To talk about the masculinity angle of this, segues nicely into Mr. Masculinity himself, Chris Cuomo. Here because the guy does have a lot of testosterone. You can't deny Chris Cuomo's testosterone here. But here was his take on some of this. Let's watch this.
They were talking at one point. Vance wanted to correct something about how Haitians got into this country, and he was right. And the moderators wouldn't let him correct it. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, good on Chris for knocking that out. But those were the kind of moments where like you said, they shut down the mic, they wouldn't let them speak, and it was a total setup because later on, this happened over on MSNBC.
Like muting powers. And I actually think if you're a woman, that might be the worst moment JD Vance had, because he was going to mansplain right over that mute button. He was, and again, I don't pretend to know how everyone will react to this. I think that a lot of women in positions of authority that should command respect just by virtue of that dynamic will see themselves in some dude that disrespected them and talked over. I mean, there was a moment like that with the vice presidential in the Harris Pence debate where she's.
Can somebody talk over her, please?
Josh, what is it with this acceptance of the word mansplaining? It's very just degrading.
Reverse it, Matt. That's all you have to do. Just reverse it to see how they'll react. Say like you're woman splaining again, and people their heads will explode. So that's how you know when it's false. It's not a real thing. Just say, well, you're doing a lot of chick talk right now. Can you please stop? Say that to any empowered woman, and
right?
It will not go well.
Yeah, exactly. I say it to my wife all the time. It doesn't go well.
I bet you do.
I think it does go to some generalizations about the sexes. In general, not all are like this, but in general, men are more, okay, what's the facts? What's the truth? Let's figure out what's the reality here. Whereas, again, in general, a lot of women, the feminine style of discourse is, okay, let's find something we can all agree on. It's just different modes of communication. And you saw that at work. What do they care about? What does that woman on, whatever the network that was care about? She doesn't care about the facts of the discussion. Whereas Chris Cuomo was pointing out, hey, JD Vance was right. He was explaining the details of the temporary protected status for Haitians, whereas the woman was just concerned about the fact that he was contradicting another woman. So that's a very different perspective on the discourse, and that's the whole mansplaining thing. It's not whether you're right or wrong; it's the fact that you dare to.
How dare you?
That is such a great point, Brian. And I guess we can go. This is the crux of male-female relationships, right? The men are always talking about trying to stick to the facts, and the women are like, "Don't talk to me about Why do you have to say it that way?
Don't raise your voice with those facts."
And you're like, good Lord, like, can we just move past this? Like, oh my, I'm having PTSD right now. It's a little warm in here. Okay, hope my wife isn't watching. Nobody send this to my wife. Okay. Let's just move on here, because there was a big gaffe that Tim Walz had, and I think we all can maybe understand what he meant, but he was so adamant about it that you kind of wonder, with the state of the world, whether or not this is actually true. Let's watch this clip.
I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA. I was an NRA guy for a long time. They used to.
I'm thinking he was saying school shooting victims. I mean,
what?
Was that? Hey, what?
Yeah, that's probably what he meant. That's probably what he meant. And when it just like he wasn't. Oh, perfect meme.
Yes.
Oh, it's on our very own WorldNet Daily.
There it is, and of course they jump on it right away.
Oh, you have to
read
the fine print. You got to see if everybody can't see this. It says not friends with school shooters.
Yes.
On the bottom of the sign. That's great.
But you know, I did see a clip of him he was asked about it post debate. He was at a pizza parlor or something, and somebody had said, "Hey, what did you mean when you said that? Did you misspoke? Do you want to clarify what you meant?" And he completely ignored the question. So I don't even know if he knew he said that. But it just really showed that I guess that rumor last night that he was nervous going into the debate was true, because to me, he felt like he was full of nerves. He did a lot of trying to search for the right things. And that's when you can tell if somebody's being honest with you, right? Because JD Vance, and Brian, you brought this up earlier as a great contrast. Like, it was clear that JD Vance was speaking from a place of his own experience and what he truly believed in. And you know, Maddow can call him slick all she wants, but when you are speaking the truth and we were relying upon a sincere caring about, you know, I thought that moment between Walz, when Walz said that his 17-year-old child witnessed a school shooting or something, he witnessed somebody getting shot, that Vance turned to him and said, "I didn't know about that," and he offered condolences on that remark. That you could really tell that Vance was being truly honest in there, and I thought that was a really good moment.
That's a great point.
I think that, you know, this strikes at something that's fundamental about these two campaigns. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are not running to be the president and vice president as we've understood those offices. They're running to be cogs in this great, you know, machine, this deep state machine that's been running the country for a long time, that Trump was really the first one to challenge. They're not running to be leaders. They're running to be servants of the deep state, whereas Trump and Vance are clearly running to be leaders. And they are speaking forcefully about what they believe and what they want to see the country, whereas the other two are just saying whatever they need to say to please their masters and hopefully salvage this campaign of theirs.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody, what was that comment about playing bingo? He said, we just had it up on the screen there. I think he was playing bingo while Vance was speaking too.
Yes,
all he kept doing was just marking his papers.
I was teaching a homeschool pod this morning, and some of the students talked about how they had watched the debate, and they said that most of the time Vance looked like this, or not Vance, Walz looked like this because he was always writing, and so you only saw the top of his head.
Exactly, yeah. And then he still couldn't get his words together. So. Well, onto a more of a serious moment here. They were talking about, of course, J6 again. They just can't seem to keep not talking about J6, and the threat to democracy that Trump has. And here was a good moment about where JD reminded viewers exactly what should be of top concern here.
I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election. And the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret? Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Yeah, great point.
Meanwhile, Tim has like resting trout face or something.
He reminds me of a deer in the headlights. But Vance alluded to this. I was hoping he'd bring it up. Democrats have not accepted the outcome of a presidential election that they lost since 1988, when George Bush beat Michael Dukakis. 2000, George W. Bush, the Florida recount, they said it was stolen. 2004, Bush against Kerry, they said that Bush had somehow stolen Ohio. And then, of course, 2016, they said that was stolen. And even other elections, Stacey Abrams famously maintained that she actually won the 2018 Georgia governor's election. So they've, Democrats started this. They started the practice of questioning the results of elections and saying that it was rigged or stolen. 2020 was really when the Republicans just got on board and said, okay, well, if you're going to play that way, well, we're going to call it rigged and stolen too. And I think we've passed the point where either side is going to accept the outcome of the election that shows that they lose. So, well, we've just got to win at this point.
Yeah, and we really need to turn out, you folks, everybody out there. If you've got a ballot, if you've got a mail-in ballot sitting on your desk, you got to send it back. If you're ready to go early vote, you got to go early vote. You got to get it out there. Well, one of the contentious moments of the night was on the subject of abortion, and the folks over at Students for Life, great organization, posted on X this clip here, and which has been being fact checked all over the place. So let's watch it.
You're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think,
That's
whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that has been being fact checked because he tried to do it there by saying that it wasn't along. But this is a report from Daily Signal. Under Governor Tim Walz, babies born alive in botched abortions were left to die. Then he removed the reporting requirements. And then I guess, Josh, in this is the bill here. Is this some of the language here?
Yes. I can hardly see it though, man.
Well, I can read it, but down there at the bottom, I mean, it's not going to expressly say, yes, you're allowed to do, X, but it says here that a local unit of government may not regulate an individual's ability to freely exercise the fundamental rights set forth in this section about abortion in a manner that is more restrictive than that set forth in this section. So apparently Minnesota doesn't have the law that every bill needs to be written in layman's terms, but that fundamentally there allows babies born alive in botched abortions being left to die. And then, of course, he removed the reporting requirement, so we don't even know how many times that's even happened, right, Brian?
Oh, sure. There's that exchange, I think, shows one that why JD Vance was a great pick, because he's able to articulate this. A lot of Republicans, when we're talking about abortion, we fall back on the defensive and trying to maintain that it's it's immoral, it's killing a human being, which is all true. But JD Vance was going right on the offensive, saying, wait a second, you're talking about abortion. You signed, one of the most liberal abortion laws in the country that allows babies who can be full term, 9 months, who survive the dismemberment of abortion, and the doctor will just let them die on the table. And that's absolutely true. That is what the law says, despite what Walz was trying to claim. Because the Democrats' whole message, I'm sure everybody's noticed this. Their entire message of this campaign is abortion, abortion, abortion. Walz even tried to bring up that ridiculous claim that Trump was going to institute a pregnancy tracker so that anyone who, any woman who didn't deliver her baby would be investigated, which is obviously absurd. But that is their one message. They can't run on the economy. They can't run on foreign policy. They can't run on crime or immigration. So they're trying to turn out their base, which is, a lot of, liberal women for whom abortion is the most important issue. They're trying to turn out that base by saying that Trump and Vance threatened their right to kill their babies. And unfortunately, because of I guess pop culture and whatever else in our society, that is the number one issue that for so many people, and they're trying to hammer that. So I think Vance was he was spot on to turn it around and say, no, you're the extremist here. You're the one who's letting babies die.
Yeah, very important. So well, please, again, follow the X account. We're posting clips from last night all day long, and you gotta share these things with your friends too. You gotta keep them focused, keep them motivated. We do want to wrap this up here by talking about the things that they didn't talk about, because once again, and I'm gonna do something myself here where we talk about how the moderators frame the questions or frame the topics, but here are the things that they didn't talk about, which when you have Governor Walz, governor of Minnesota, during the 2020 riots on the national stage, and you don't ask him about his handling of the violent Floyd riots and the burning of his cities in 2020. They also didn't ask any questions about the China threat. And if he's such an expert on China, maybe we could have learned a little bit more about that. There were no questions on the Ukraine and Russia war. There were no questions about the strike, the longshoreman strike that just went bonkers yesterday. And then once again, nothing about the pandemic, nothing about COVID. It just is like it's never happened. So folks, these are the questions you need to be asking your friends about. Why doesn't the media do this? And then make sure you're always following us here at WorldNet Daily. Guys, let's get into what's going on in Israel, because World War III seems to be getting closer and closer. Check out some of this. Is the story over there. Biden-Harris in contact with Iran over the scope of attack on Israel. This happened overnight, even as the debate was getting started. But let's look at some of this footage, this frightening footage. Yeah, that's wild things going on over there. And then the Trump campaign dropped a video talking about the attack on Israel. Let's take a look at that.
Like us, China also saw their weakness. So did Putin. Then he invaded Ukraine. Hamas saw Harris' anti-Israel statements and will use it as a green light to keep murdering Israelis. And Iran thinks Harris is so incompetent. New intel shows they're trying to help Harris win the election. America doesn't need another TikTok performer. We need the strength that will protect us.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
Yeah, Josh, our resident doomer, where do you think we're headed, man? I mean, this is the regime that's in power right now. We're going to get 4 more years of it.
And I'm starting to be I'm pretty hopeful that Trump will win, but it does seem like, the system that Brian mentioned that, the puppets are going to potentially work for. It does seem like that system is really pro-war. They want to get us into a scenario that will be dumped in Trump's lap. The Israel thing just is really crazy, because imagine, they're surrounded by enemies. I was talking to a friend this morning about this. They're absolutely surrounded by people that are hostile to them. Any negotiation that they've done over the years, it just kind of all goes back to some kind of terrorist effort. October 7th kind of galvanized them to say no more and then clear out space. So they have their invasion going on of Lebanon, but also they're going to strike Iran because, imagine, I don't think we can quite imagine this here, because we are surrounded. We're moated by oceans, and an incoming ballistic missile attack just is unthinkable here. But they're going to live with this for the foreseeable future until they slap down their enemies, hard enough that they just don't come back around for a while. It will escalate. It's logical. You can't let no modern civilization lets an enemy at standoff distance fire ballistic missiles into their city. You just can't allow it, or you won't have a society.
Right. Yeah, it's so true. And Brian, this kind of like goes into the issue that Russia has with Ukraine joining NATO and having ballistic missiles and have NATO nations along their border. Josh is right. We can't fathom that here because we have Canada to the north, Mexico to the south, and we're protected by 2 oceans. That it's kind of hard to imagine living under these conditions.
Well, 60 years ago, President John Kennedy almost took us to nuclear war because we couldn't fathom having nuclear missiles in Cuba, 100 miles off the coast of Florida. And now, the situation's kind of reversed. We're pushing the border against Russia. And obviously you've got Israel here, which is surrounded by enemies that want to see it destroyed. I mean, there's obviously two levels here. There's the moral level and there's the pragmatic level. And both sides are trying to claim the moral high ground, both Israel and the, Arab and, Persian enemies here. And this is where I think we need someone like President Trump back in power. He was able to pull off the Abraham Accords, getting various Arab nations who had been enemies with Israel to recognize, okay, this country is here and it's going to exist and it's going to continue to exist. And, we're much better off if we trade and interact and have peaceful relations than if we're on a constant war footing. You had the UAE and I think a couple other nations signed on to that. Even going back to the 1970s, Jimmy Carter brought Israel and Egypt to the negotiating table and, put an end to their hostilities. They had gone to war in the 6-Day War in 1967, the Yom Kippur War in 1973, but Carter got them to agree, okay, let's, Egypt can have the Sinai back. And in return, they're not going to continue to foment war and threaten Israel from, that border, at least. President Carter obviously just turned 100 just the other day. So, getting Trump back in office, I think, is probably the best hope for peace in the Middle East. Obviously, Israel is going to defend itself. They're going to strike back against Iran. But we need someone in there who's able to negotiate and convince both sides that peace is better than war.
Yeah. Yeah, well, David Sachs, with 34 days left until the election, David Sachs posted up on X here that the October surprise is World War III. Meanwhile, Biden looks like a piece of flotsam washed up on the beach, and Kamala Harris is too scared to do a press conference. January 20 can't come soon enough, and that's the big thing here. I mean, the election is 34 days away, but he doesn't take office if he wins until January 20. And so that's another 2 months afterwards. Josh,
it's like a perfect window to get away with a lot. I was going to just make a quick joke here that Biden's starting to look more like Jimmy Carter every day.
Yeah, they're roughly the same age.
I don't know if you saw the new video, poor Jimmy Carter being wheeled out to receive some sun or something like that. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, this is like in the movie. This is a movie, right? This is the perfect moment. There's this transitional period. It's going to be chaotic. Everybody go now, quick, attack, do your thing now.
I mean, that's what it feels like. That's what it feels like. And I still am under the presumption that at some point during this, they could pull the 25th Amendment on Biden and just make Kamala president, at least for a short time.
Yes, they get big points for that.
Yeah,
First,
I mean, that would be a huge
Indian/black female president. Huge.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah.
What's interesting to me is that it doesn't seem like there is a president. Neither Biden nor Harris seems to actually be running things. Right. Yeah. They haven't had an actual cabinet meeting for many, many months. And then they had one, except it was Jill Biden presiding, as if she's a constitutionally elected leader of our country. And so it seems like the different cabinet heads are just doing their own thing. You've got the Secretary of State Blinken doing what he wants and the Secretary of Defense doing what he wants. Everybody's operating independently. There's no unifying cohesive strategy going on. And so I don't know. I roll the dice on that 50-50 if they're actually going to push Biden out and try and prop Kamala up. It might be a last ditch effort to get her a few more votes by promoting her as the incumbent, the first woman president. You got to vote for her. We can't switch horses in midstream, even though we just switched horses in midstream. Or maybe they just figure, okay, let's keep running things the way they are. And each of these stakeholders, each of these cabinet secretaries will continue to do what they want to do without having to worry about, someone on top trying to rein them in.
Yeah.
It really is the evolution of the swamp, right? Like the swamp is so large that it overtakes every role and no one really knows the source of it or where the leadership is. It's just in these disparate heads of the bureaucracies, which is literally not what we thought we were doing when we were voting for democracy.
Right.
Well, again, it's this year we're voting for a system. Do we want to continue this existing system of the deep state, the blob, or are we going to actually vote for a leader who is accountable to the people and is, acting on behalf of the people?
Well, we want to trust the experts no matter what happens, guys.
Yeah. Well, one of those experts apparently was Joe Biden back in 2020, telling everybody if Trump became elected, that we'd be in a war with Iran. And lo and behold, so let's watch this clip.
The world has changed because what Trump has done. And the American people, including independents and some Republicans, know how bad he is, know how much he's misrepresented, know how he's getting close to getting us in a war. I said, as the walls close in on this man, I'm worried he's going to get us to war in Iran. Unfortunately, I may have been right. The fact of the matter is there's a lot at stake in this election.
Good Lord. And Brian, I mean, aside from what he said, the man looked like he was 50 years old.
Yeah, who's that spry young man right there?
I can't. Now I know why people actually voted for him, because he actually wasn't as bad as he is now.
Oh, well, even then we knew he was bad. He was in his basement and he was being wheeled out for just a couple events. But, I guess we didn't, figure how much worse he was going to get. But another interesting thing about that clip is the Democrats project so much. Every time they accuse Republicans, their opponents, of doing something or planning something, it's what they're doing or planning. When they say Trump is going to, weaponize the government against his political opponents, and they have no self-awareness, or at least they're not showing any self-awareness to the fact that that's exactly what they've done. And now they're, go back then, they said Trump's going to get us in a war with Iran, when that seems to be what their side is hell-bent on doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's look at this other clip here. Trump yesterday talking about the Iran bombing Israel.
The world right now is spiraling out of control. You might not have seen what's happened because it was a few hours ago. A lot of people were here. There's so many people outside, which we appreciate. But a lot of people were here a short time ago. Iran launched 181 ballistic missiles at Israel, and I've been talking about World War III for a long time. And I don't want to make predictions because the predictions always come true. We're not going to make, but they are very close to global catastrophe. We have a non-existent president and a non-existent vice president who should be in charge, but nobody knows what's going on. She was at a fundraiser in San Francisco.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything we've just been saying. I mean, it's so obvious now what's going on that it's just it's atrocious. And then we have got one final clip here with Trump on the real risk of nuclear war.
Under Joe Biden, the world has become vastly more dangerous, and there is no greater danger than the deadly menace of nuclear weapons and hypersonic missiles. Hypersonic missiles move at many times the speed of sound and 6 times faster than current missiles. Armed with nuclear weapons, they could annihilate entire cities and even countries within minutes. And we cannot let this happen. If you take a look right now, the nuclear word is being mentioned all the time. This is a word that you're not allowed to use. It was never used during the Trump administration, but now other countries are using that word against us because they have no respect for our leadership. World War III would be a catastrophe unlike any other. This would make World War I and World War II like very small battles.
Yeah, wow. Well, I mean, let's maybe can we postulate a little bit on what would World War III look like? Like, who would be the Axis and the Allies? Where would the theaters be? Have you thought about that, Brian?
Well, I don't remember if it was a podcast or an essay. I consume so much, sometimes I forget. That was saying that World War III, at least from the American point of view, would not be like World War I and II in a way, because in those wars, the U.S. and all the other powers, they did full mobilization. It was total war. The entire economy of those nations were turned toward the war effort, and they were drafting young men by the hundreds of thousands or millions of people. And we're not in that position right now. I don't think we could mobilize our economy for war, because our economy, a lot of our manufacturing has been outsourced. Imagine us going to war with China. Where are we going to manufacture stuff? Because they're the ones who are manufacturing things for us. So I think we obviously have still a pretty mighty military, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Army. And so we could deploy things, but I don't think we could last in a protracted war. And I don't think the other countries necessarily could either. Now, I don't know the state of China's China's material left, but you look at what Russia's doing in Ukraine. It's it's becoming just this war of attrition where they're very, very slowly gaining ground over the course of 2 years now, 2.5 years. So I don't know. I get the sense that a actual World War III would be quick and unfortunately extremely destructive, especially if it's against another nuclear power. And remember, Russia has nuclear weapons, Israel has nuclear weapons, and obviously we in China have them as well. And nobody, I don't think anybody in any of these countries wants to use them. But if Putin feels like his regime, his country is at existential risk, like, if NATO is going to march into Moscow tomorrow, then I don't doubt he would use them. And I think the other countries are in the same boat.
Yeah, I mean, we've operated for decades under the MAD, right? Mutually assured destruction, which has kept everybody from launching these missiles. And the way things are, I kind of feel like when we see this internal destruction of our own nation, it's clearly on purpose. I mean, what they're doing with the open borders and everything, it's clearly on purpose. And I don't know what they think they'd be saving at this point with the mutually assured destruction deterrent, because it's not what we're already being destroyed. So what's left? You might as well just conquer. No, Josh?
Matt, the one thing there's a lot of nuclear talk, but what people don't realize is there's no like half measures to mutually assured destruction. There's nothing in place that says, oh, if Russia hits part of Ukraine with a tactical nuclear weapon, which is a small yield device that wipes out a whole division of troops, that the minute like nukes are on the table, everybody only has a "we turn our nukes on too" button. We're still in the Cold War model, like Buzz Patterson shared with us when he was here. There's no like a medium where the nuke goes off and then we have a conversation like, hey, if this went too far, we should back off. Because the whole system's designed just to look for that moment where the nuke goes off, and then everybody's getting ready to turn all their nukes on just in case the other side's doing the same thing. And there's just no middle ground here. That's maybe the most terrifying thing that people don't really understand. And so the pundits say things like World War III a lot, but like if it involves nukes at all, it involves nukes everywhere. And we don't have a scenario that we've seen since Hiroshima and Nagasaki where the nukes go off and then nothing happens.
Yeah.
Well, that's only because at that time we were the only power with nuclear weapons, and ever since, U.S. and Russia in the Cold War were both smart enough to know that we don't actually want to go down that road.
Right, and so how we don't even know how the system works anymore. We assume there's someone sitting next to our president, which is what it's supposed to be, with the approval to act when we're in some terrible moment where a nuke goes off somewhere in the world. But I don't know. Like it's next level. Brian could be right. It could be. I'm a little as a doomer, as you guys all know. I think that we are heading towards a draft. We have no choice, because the one thing that people do assume is that if it goes off in one place, it will go off in other places. So if it goes off well enough with NATO in Ukraine, if NATO enters the fray with Russia, our enemies will move in other places. They will absolutely do that because it's the right time to do that. So you can't fight a Pacific war and a land war in Europe, and some kind of mobilization in the Middle East. All three are not possible. So you would have to have a draft.
Yeah. Well, one thing we know that is coming, Brian, is censorship, because it's already here. And so, audience, what you need to do is you need to make sure you're following us, but also follow these individual folks, so that way you can at least have one outlet you can go to. And I know Brian Allman is definitely one of those folks. Brian, how can people follow you, and where can we keep track of your work?
Well, follow me on X, or Twitter, as I still like to call it, at Gem State Brian, Gem State for Idaho. Oh, that's the site. And also at gemstatechronicle.com, I write about local politics and occasionally foray into national stuff, but I keep most of that here at WorldNet Daily.
Fantastic. All right. And Josh, we're getting all the latest news over there on X at WorldNet Daily, but also on Rumble and Telegram. Share with us.
Yeah, guys, I would love to get this Rumble channel up in subscribers. I love Rumble. We don't get any warnings on Rumble when we put up content or we say something that we're not supposed to say, according to their censorship rules, whatever, right? Go to Rumble and follow us there. It's guaranteed to be up until, you know, who knows what happens, but that's where you can see all our content. And we're creating a lot of it. YouTube, yeah, we still want YouTube to work, but X is the spot where you see half the content we have here. We're pulling off X. X marks the spot. You hear that, Elon? Okay, and there's all the other channels. Also, like if you like to know like what's happening in the intersection of politics and pop culture, our Instagram account is going off. Boom. And I know the person that works on that account, and they're doing a lot of funny stuff over there. In fact, yeah, I can barely keep up with it, but if you want to know what's going on with Diddy, I don't, but if you do, you can find it over there.
Diddy, I don't. That's going to be the next album. Hey, and then also, you know, at the top, we shared that tweet from Jeffrey Tucker, and it just so happens that Elizabeth Farrer interviewed Jeffrey Tucker. And is that premiering today on WorldNet Daily?
Yes, it is. Let's see.
Fantastic. So
yeah, if you go over to worldnetdaily.com, you'll see that the thumbnail for that video is there for Elizabeth's show. Right. And she's asking Jeffrey all the crazy questions, essentially like, hey, what's going to happen with if Kamala wins? What is that? That's like a nightmare. What are the nightmare scenarios? And Jeffrey weighs in. It's very interesting.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, folks. Well, thank you for joining us today on a Wednesday. We'll see you back here on Friday. God bless.
Thanks, everybody.